Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and today we are continuing our epic countdown to the DC Studios Superman movie that's coming out. God, like what? Like, Chris, you screwed up. Sorry. Technical difficulties, everybody. What is going on? There we go. Anyway, back to this. For our countdown to the ever-growing Superman movie coming up, which is just in, 2 months? Not very long at all. And we have started we started back in September. We are vastly approaching the end here, which is kind of a bummer because this has been fun kind of going and just deep dive in Superman for, basically 12 months. So
1 month, 2 weeks, 44 days.
Yes.
At least unless you count, apparently there's going to be Prime screening tickets.
Oh, God.
For earlier than that. So
I don't want to deal with that.
Keep your eyes
too
peeled.
much. That's too much. So anyway, if you haven't already, we have other shows you can watch on this on this playlist here. If you look under the playlist section of the Comic Binge, you will see many episodes for the Countdown to Superman with a similar movie logo there with other comics that we talked about, like Birthright, Panic in the Sky, All Seasons. The list goes on. We still have a couple more to add here, but if you haven't already, please go and subscribe to the Comic Binge. Appreciate everyone already has. Only makes sense, or spider sense, you could say. I don't know, whatever. Without further ado, I will bring on our distinguished guest, my co-host, I should say, more than anything. Mr. Clow, how are we doing today, sir?
Oh, hanging it in there. How are you, my friend?
I'm all right. I have a lot to say about this book, to be honest. I'm very excited. So, yeah, I'm ready to get into it. El Corazon, sir, how are we doing?
I'm here.
You are definitely here.
I'm definitely here.
Drinking a
That
little
counts for a lot these days. All right,
fair.
Showing up.
What are we drinking? Scotch.
12-year-old Macallan.
Okay. I don't know what that is, but tell me.
Scotch whiskey.
Oh, okay. I'm a whiskey guy, so I could get behind that.
Should come on down here and have some.
I will. God damn it.
Maybe in July.
I wish.
Live in Texas sounds
Like
challenging.
It can be. Although I didn't even know if I was going to be on the show tonight.
What happened?
Because it was raining so hard with severe thunderstorms, yet it was completely sunny out, but the rain was going sideways.
Oh,
Yeah. Nothing's worse than sunny rain to me, because growing up in the desert, it's like it's got to be overcast to rain, because that's like the relief. That's the joy of rain.
and the
It's
sun's
not
super
sunny,
bright and it's
but it's
glistening.
sunny rain. It's like, no, it takes away the fun.
Well, and the glare. It adds so much glare, especially if you're trying to drive.
Yeah.
But
It's
now
like-
we're under like a severe thunderstorm watch.
Rain coming in from the side. Even rain that seemed to jump up from underneath.
Oh my God. It's been a minute since I've seen that movie. I've always loved Forrest Gump too.
Same.
But
it's
been a minute.
My 23rd birthday, we were in Hawaii, and we went to Bubblegum Shrimp on Maui, and I stumped the guy who was given the Forrest Gump trivia questions.
Nice.
So
Not
I've
surprising.
got that claim to fame.
Is that the same famous trip that I'm aware of?
No, you're thinking of something totally different, and how dare you for even bringing that up?
It's still one of the best stories of all time. Enough said.
Okay.
Enough said.
Okay. Moving on.
It sounds like an after show conversation. I need to be
Oh, it's an after show conversation. 100%. Okay. So there, this is such a big topic. I've waited to I basically waited to talk about this story for a long time. I feel like the Superman story or Superman movie coming out, it seemed like the perfect time to bring it up, to talk about it, because you know,
Paul,
He's just gone now?
gone now. Anyways, I don't even know if you remember, Chris, but once upon a time, James Gunn was writing stuff and tweeting stuff back when Twitter was Twitter.
Yeah.
And he posted an image from the trade paperback, I think, that was very similar to this panel that we have up here. And people were going nuts with like, what does this mean? Like Justice League movie, Kingdom Come movie, what's going on? And really, what we got was this logo.
Yeah.
But I've always kind of wondered, especially with the way the most recent trailer has been, and I'm not the first person who said this, of like if Gunn is doing like a reverse Kingdom Come, not a Superman coming out of retirement to show these young whippersnappers the way, but maybe a young Superman early in his career showing heroes how to behave and act heroically and doing the right thing. So
I think there's merit to that. Let me just put this on the record real fast. My guess is that this is not going to be the logo at the end of the movie. Because he has spoken now for like 2 years about how this is about how Superman reconciles the two sides of his identity between being from Earth and being from Krypton. My guess in the movie is that this is going to be the traditional Kryptonian House of El sigil. And by the end of the movie, he is going to wear a costume that is more quote unquote traditional, and that's going to alter this into the traditional logo that we know as a symbol of the fact that he has embraced both sides of himself. That's my guess.
I think that sounds pretty accurate, or seems like very likely.
We'll see. I think there might have been a set photo of Supergirl with this, but she's also more Kryptonian by nature. So
yeah,
jury's still out.
Yeah. So anyway, when before I booted off myself, which is hilarious. Kingdom Come was a just kind of give you a little bit of history with me and why we kind of chose it. Kingdom Come is one of those stories where Chris for sure was a little younger, so you weren't there for when it was released, but Javi, you were, so you're kind of like with me a little bit on this. I remember reading Wizard magazine and them talking about Alex Ross and Mark Waid teaming up for this, and they are showing sketches, like the same sketches you see in the backup of these trades that we get. Those same sketches they were putting as previews basically for and hyping up the book. And as someone who was that Superman is exactly what they posted, and they'd have a little snippet of like what to expect and whatnot. And again, this is for Wizard magazine back in the day, and how they're telling a future tale of these older heroes. And like I remember being mesmerized by the Flash. I love their interpretation of the Flash. I thought that was a really inspired take about this. He's running so fast that he can't stand still, right? He's always moving. So he's never, like, you see like this blur of a person. Yeah, just like that. And that was purposeful, right? And as a Marvel zombie in the mid 90s, DC, I would dabble here or there with DC characters, but obviously Marvels came out with Busiek and Alex Ross, and it was a huge success. And Alex Ross was starting to kind of really put his name out there. This story got a lot of buzz, and I remember this came out right before I stopped reading comics. It was like right towards the tail end. I remember buying this, and I think Heroes Reborn around the same time, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And I meant to go grab my issues, and I'll do it when you guys are talking at some point. But I remember missing out on the first printing, I think, of them, and I bought all the second prints at the comic shop because I missed out on it. And I remember reading it and not only knowing that, obviously Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, and a few things here and there, but I remember just being in awe of it, even not knowing the characters as much, just really loving it, like loving this, and thought it was just such an inspired, just a, we'll dive deeper into it, but I remember at the time, Javi, when this came out, it was a big deal. Alex Ross
Yeah.
doing this, it was a big deal. Talk a little, if you can, a little bit about like what you remember of this series coming out in the mid '90s here.
I certainly knew of Marvels that you had mentioned and I'd seen
Yeah.
it, at the shop or the bookstore or whatever, but I'd never really read it. But I remember seeing this art on the screen. There was an advertisement that used this image saying, whose will be done. There was another one of the Spectre, and it had, heads going down and asking the same question. And I was immediately intrigued because, I mean, it's what, 95, 96 when they started advertising it.
Yeah.
And, I'd already gone through Zero Hour and was a huge Mark Waid fan at this point already, just from
Flash and everything.
From the Flash. I mean, that Mark Waid is what made me a Flash fan. I mean, I was a Flash fan, but he made me a Wally West fan. And so I, eagerly awaited this. I was already becoming a huge Superman fan at that point, and bought the first issue, the prestige format. Hey Theo, off the shelf, and fell in love with just this, unbelievable future world, and when you get to that image of Superman Returns, and I always listen to the soundtracks when I read, and just like everything just timed up perfectly for that moment, and you feel so elated, and then you get to the next page, and you're like, oh, like this is not going to go well, and by the time we get to the fourth issue, like this is one of my favorite comics of all time, and it's still one of my favorite comics of all time. And when they announced Graffiti Designs were doing this limited edition, like hardcover. Like I had to buy it, and it's 2 volumes, and like this is all the extra features, and then you've got the book, and it looks like it's something you would get on the hymn in a church.
See, I like that.
That's
really cool.
This was $90 in 1997.
Holy hand grenade! In '97?
In '97. So this was not cheap, and I heard about it, and I had to pre-order it from Charlie's Comics. I think I got it at Charlie's Comics. And yeah, but I mean, it was worth it to me, because at this point, this is like,
for sure,
my favorite story, or at least top 3. And it came with an autographed Mark Waid and Alex Ross image, and it's got their signatures on it, number 522. I don't know how many they made, but I mean, it was worth that investment. And when they started doing the action figures from DC Direct, I got every single action figure, even though they weren't the best at the time, and very stiff, and a lot of them were not painted well or kind of broke. The only one I never got was the Wizard special edition. Like they had one you could mail away from Wizard, and it was Green Arrow. It was the Green Arrow Hard Traveling Heroes figure, but it was painted up to be Red Arrow, and that was the only one out of the whole line I never got. And I just love this story. Got my second Superman shirt was a Kingdom Come Superman shirt. So it left a monumental impact on me as a reader, what it was trying to say, and the conflict that it put Superman through. And to me, it's still, I've left it alone for a while. I haven't read it. And I used to read it all the time, and I haven't read it in a long time. Which was great about this experience, because I got to maybe not freshly look at it. It's not available in the omnibus format. It's only 4 issues. I'm surprised that they haven't done like Kingdom Come or the Kingdom and all that, like collected in one thing.
Just time out real quick.
There's an absolute.
Well, I have the absolute. And by the way, this Andreas is a from my comic shop. He's one of the people who works there, and I told him
Nice.
he should stop by. He's a guy. He's an omnibus nerd. I told him omnibuses suck, and so which I'm right.
Gotcha.
So
Get
this
that out
is
of
what
your
you. This is what I was telling you about earlier, Andreas. That this thing is chef's kiss, and I was telling the guys before. I hadn't taken it out of its wrapping until this year. I got it like 2 years ago, and there's a torn page. And I was bumming out. I was like, no. So always check your books when you buy them. So just FYI. But yeah, like this is yeah. So Andreas, no omnibus, thank God. But there's not enough to warrant an omnibus. Also, thank God. So Javi.
This is live footage of Paul seeing that rip page, by the way.
Oh yeah.
So
yes.
You know.
Really quick,
But
Chris,
just to
finish up and we'll
wrap it up there. Just to see it stand the test of time and get sequels of one manner and the other, be it the Kingdom event or Alex Ross's version of it, and to see this version of Superman come back in JSA for a brief moment, and for what I thought culminated in Crisis on Infinite Earths with Brandon Routh donning the costume and sharing this history now with his version of Superman. I thought that was like the pinnacle, cut to last year when we see that that's the new emblem for Superman, just yellow instead of black. And so it's one of the things that most excites me about this movie is seeing that iconography and having it more out there in the world, because outside of the classic symbol, like this is my favorite alternate S shield. So
yeah,
Chris, I give the floor to Chris.
Yeah. Really quickly, we'll get deeper into stories here, but I want to just I'm curious because you came into it later, and you I want to know what your perception of, or what you heard about it. What was your introduction to the story and everything? Because I know you worked at a comic shop and everything. So tell us a little story of how you kind of discovered this book, if you heard it from other people or whatever.
I mean, it had always loomed large, just because despite the fact that it is a DCU wide story, I think most people do see this as mostly a significant milestone for Superman storytelling, which is kind of interesting considering the fact that everybody is in this book. There are very few stones left unturned by the creative team. Even characters who are not appearing, in present day are touched on in some form or fashion. Usually, I mean, it extends back to the legacy of the JSA at the beginning with Wesley Dodds, of course, but I mean, it even alludes to the Legion. It is incredibly fully featured from a DC Universe perspective. But my perception of it before I read it was that it was primarily a Superman story, and that perception largely does hold true, I think, because understandably, Superman is the character who is trying to overcome the most over the course of these issues. The first time I read it, I mean, I had always been really taken with the imagery, even as a younger fan, but I had never actually read the book. And I'm glad that I kind of waited to read it until I had maybe, I guess, a higher level of maturation, I suppose, because this is a very mature book, not in the sense that there's gratuitous violence or anything, although there is some, but the themes in it are mature. I think it requires is the wrong word, but the experience is enriched if you have a strong sense of DC Universe history, but also a strong sense of like American cultural identity and the American zeitgeist, because the subversion of that is really a key element of this book. And confronting a harsher world, those ideas probably would have gone over my head if I had read this as a younger fan, despite my temptation to. But I really knew that this was something I needed to put under my belt. It was probably around 06, maybe 07. It was right before it was announced, actually, that Thy Kingdom Come was going to be a story that was told in Jeff Johns' Justice Society of America series. So that gave me the perfect excuse to absorb this book for the first time in a meaningful way. You know, I've been exposed to the images for so long, and they're beautiful, of course, but that's only one side of the equation when it comes to the richness of the narrative that's on display here. And, you know, I really do feel like the relevance of Kingdom Come is higher now than it maybe has ever been. There are a lot of people who might feel disenchanted with the way that society is moving. The commentary that is on display about what it means for these long-standing symbols to maybe start standing for things that it didn't seem like they stood for before. That's something that I find really interesting about this book. But at the core, at the beating heart of it, I mean, and this is going to sound hyperbolic, but I truly believe this just myself. It's not anybody else's opinion but my own. Kingdom Come #1 might be a perfect comic book.
Yeah.
Might be a perfect #1 comic book in terms of what it sets up for the rest of the narrative. The way that it ends on a note that is hopeful while still managing to cut you off at the knees to tease what is still going to happen and what these characters are going to need to go through. It is incredibly well paced. And
Yes.
that's before even getting to just the sheer beauty on display from the visuals. But, you know, does this story hit as hard without the really dialed in writing element that Mark Waid brings to the table? No, I don't think it does.
Not even close.
The combination of these two creators created magic. And you know, to me, it might drag a little bit in the middle, but the upswing at the end is well worth it. And it's all in service of building the broader narrative. So I read it, and then I actually found Thy Kingdom Come in JSA to be a pretty worthy follow-up to the story, all things considered, even though Mark Waid wasn't involved. Ross was. In fact, he drew a one-shot Superman comic that kind of filled in some of what is alluded to in this story. And it was pretty solid. It doesn't come anywhere close to the original series. Thy Kingdom Come also, frankly, doesn't come anywhere close to the original series, but very few things do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an interquel, basically.
Yeah, effectively. Superman is displaced during the events of Kingdom Come in Thy Kingdom Come. Spoiler alert. But for my money, this is my favorite Elseworld story. You know, I don't need Elseworld stories to really like pull the rug out from the DC universe that I know. To me, this is a really optimal use of the Elseworlds label by just skewing things enough and pushing things forward enough that it feels new and it feels fresh, but it still also feels truthful. You know, I don't need a story of a totalitarian Superman to check my boxes for an Elseworld story. I'm much more interested in a story that challenges the guy that I know with circumstances that you might not be able to find in the traditional DC universe. Maybe that means I'm not a particularly imaginative person, but at the end of the day, everybody just feels so on point here, and they're confronting a problem that can't necessarily be overcome through traditional heroics. And the way that the narrative tries to explore that and comment on it, this is a layered, fascinating book, and I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, there's the one thing we really want to touch on here is I think you did a great job, Chris, of really explaining how issue 1 might be a perfect comic book. I think this is a perfect series, to be honest. Is it like you could nitpick it and say, yeah, it drags a little bit in the middle, but I feel like you have to really get the emphasize of what it's at stake. You have to kind of lull a little bit and kind of mold things over between the characters. So I would just say I would counter with that. Is that being stalling and being kind of lagging a little bit? You could say that maybe, but I prefer to see it as you need to really emphasize what's at stake, what's going on with these characters because of what the ultimate setup is eventually here. Um, the one thing about Kingdom Come that I think is so brilliant, and like I know Mark, for those who don't know, this is a big on the surface, and you could really, you could say this is a commentary on the 90s, comic storytelling, right? About criticizing these extreme heroes all of a sudden, being put in the forefront. And I say extreme like with Rob Liefeld and things like that. It's literally what they're making fun of. Magog is basically Cable, right? That is based off of. Which, by the way, I think if that's the case, that's the raddest rip of all time. I think Magog is kind of rad looking, to be honest, but that maybe I'm the problem. I don't know. But the thing about Kingdom Come is that it's supposed to be a commentary about, these heroes losing themselves and feeling like they're not their has-beens, but they've been replaced by this other thing, and they're not really needed necessarily, and they're jaded and they're bitter, and then they have to come back and figure things out because things have gotten out of control because what they were before wasn't all that bad, kind of a thing. I mean, I'm simplifying it and giving my own spin on things, but this is kind of the bare essentials here. But the thing about the Kingdom Come that I always am just amazed by is the fact it's basically like, a Christmas story, right? Or what's the Scrooge,
Christmas Carol.
Yeah, Christmas Carol. Excuse me. Christmas Story is Ralphie. Christmas Carol.
When Superman shot his eye out.
Yeah. I mean, he kind of does that here. No, but like there's Christmas Carol. I like how it's not a themed, a holiday theme, but it's like that whole idea of a spirit guiding the main character, right? Like, and as someone who grew up or it was surrounded themselves with Christian culture for many, many years, I really appreciated this because you see the effects of the pastor, and I always forget his name. I apologize.
Norman McKay.
Pastor McKay. The fact that this pastor is losing touch with himself is obviously a parallel for the heroes, right? And that the Spectre represents this idea of like, you need to find yourself and understand like where you are in this place, just like they do. And I love the fact that you have this and you're using Wade is pulling on different things and different themes to build off each other. And he's being really creative about it. Like the whole Christmas Carol idea of a spirit guiding him and showing him what is going on and what his role in that obviously at the end is so brilliant. And again, a pastor telling again, major spoiler alerts here, people, but basically a pastor is telling Superman to forgive himself, to me, is like the only thing that could make Superman, in my opinion, like see the light like that, right? Like someone like for him to build, I don't think he knows he's a pastor at this point, but it feels like only of someone who a man of God, whether you think that's your religion or not, but a man of God in one respect or another is able to understand the reverence of being human and the importance of that, even though they may be more powerful. It's beautiful. And what Mark Waid is able to accomplish with this is so, yes, I know, Andrew said Christmas is rule. What they're able to accomplish with this is so amazing. They're able to do it in 4 issues. And I know they're double size or whatever, but the fact they're able to get that much material put into this one story is really impressive. And I marvel, no pun intended here with what's on the cover or what we have showing up here, but I marvel at the fact that they were able to do such an amazing story in such a limited amount of time. The pacing of this story is incredible. The fact that he's able to juggle this many characters and not feel like someone's lot is being pushed out or there's not enough, attention. They focus on the right things with everything. It truly is an amazing, to me, demonstration of what a comic book can do and a superhero story can do, and how you can have so many different characters and never feel that you're oversaturizing the story. So the last thing I'll throw out to you guys, and I really want to emphasize this, and I thought it was really interesting when I heard this, I don't, I don't. I'll just go say it. I don't give a crap. What do I have to lose? Because I'm a nobody. I was watching.
You're somebody, Paul.
Somebody to you guys. All that matters. I was watching Comic Tropes, and I'm generally a fan. And he was saying, I forgot exactly, but it was like an Alex Ross episode, and he kind of critiqued, he talked about how great of an artist he was, sure, but he was, for his opinion, again, I'm just paraphrasing what he said. Again, what I remember, he kind of criticized his layouts a little bit. He's like, yeah, he's not. I don't know if he said he wasn't as creative as his layouts or whatever. And I remember, hearing that and just kind of laughing, being like, you don't need to be extraneous, excuse me, I can't talk today. Is it normal? As you need to be with an artist, because your layouts are literally cinematic. And I think this, to me, shows you the power of comics, that if you can simplify it and you can make comics cinematic, and it's not a bad thing. And I think that's what that's what Alex Ross does with the Kingdom Come. And I think it's obviously with Marvels as well. I think anything he does, he just makes things cinematic. He has that realism factor. It's not just it's not just mainly the pictures that he paints and the photorealistic images he has. It's the way he tells a story. And I think that's purposeful in what he does. And obviously, you're doing this much detail, having massively creative layouts it's gonna be hard to, I think, convey your story, in my opinion. So, to me, when I reread this recently, guys, I was actually impressed with the layouts he does, because everything has impact. Can you throw really quickly, and I don't know I'm talking a lot, but I told you guys I'd have a lot to say about the story. Can you throw up the picture of the Spectre coming through the church with McKay looking up at him? You're telling me that this doesn't have impact? This is this is basically a splash page with an overlay of a panel here, right? This is freaking impactful. I don't care if this is not I come from the music world, and the one thing that you always hear musicians say, for the most part, is that usually simpler is better. Always. And I am by no means even remotely a physical artist of drawing, and I wish I was, but I'm not. But I'm pretty sure that the medium of different mediums of art, of all kinds of art with a capital A, have a very similar feel, that usually simpler is going to be always, usually most of the time, better. And then this is, I think, no better demonstrated, in my opinion, than this page right here. You have Spectre coming through a church, a spirit, like just beautiful, like it's angelic, right? And you have the light beaming from McKay here. This is just two pictures, and you automatically get it's powerful in its images. And if you try to be creative with this, it loses the impact. And throughout this whole series, I don't know if do you have them fighting the heroes by any chance?
Which heroes fighting the heroes?
Like in the very early on, when Superman, like before Superman shows up and saves the day. Do you have anything like that?
Not really.
Throw up any fighting, like just kind of an action page, if you don't mind.
Well, I was going to ask you about this page. Does this give you Fantastic Four #1 vibes?
I think so, a little bit. Nothing like, I wouldn't say, maybe it's kind of
it's not a 1-for-1, but there's something about just the guys stretching and everyone's kind of laid out. It reminds me of that first cover.
I'll pick something out here real quick.
Evocative.
Yeah, let me pick something out. Let's see here. This might be what I'm looking for, maybe. Yeah, this is a great example. This is 3 panels, and it's but I love how it's simplistic, but it is so effective. And you have Superman just being like, "You're done," right? And it's basically 3 gods, dominating and showing how powerful and dominating they are, and not just in a, what's the word, like a cheeky way. It's a very dominant way, right? It's not just a
Yeah.
passive thing. It's a very aggressive thing. And to show how powerful these guys still are, this is simple, but it's so powerfully effective that you can't help like everything. There's a lot of thought in every panel. And I think that's the thing about, to me, that I would never criticize him being a super great, not a super great storyteller, because I think that, again, these panels are hard to draw and they take a lot of time, obviously, because he's all the detail. But I think that they're so purposeful, and they need to be, when you're drawing that much detail and you're having limited time, every panel is so precious. You have to really emphasize what you're getting across, and you have to sacrifice a little bit of the creative side, I'd say, but for really direct, effective storytelling. So I'll have probably more to say about it, but if you guys want to jump in about this and move on, we can, but go
I
ahead.
mean, just the fact that I vehemently disagree with that, just I don't
Agreed.
understand that at all. You can like his style or not like his style, and that's a matter of taste. And you know, I don't begrudge anyone if they don't like the whole photorealism thing, but to say that it's not, you know, cinematic or his layouts are bad, I'm like, there's so
I
many
he
things
didn't say they were
that
bad. He didn't say they were bad, for the record, but he did definitely talked about them as like not as being as great as they maybe could be, or something like that.
I
So
mean, I don't feel that's fair at all. I mean, are these
I agree.
pages J.H. Williams the third levels of creativity?
No,
No, but very, very, very few people are. But I mean, like you were saying, everything packs, you know, a punch. There's drama in every panel, no matter what shape it is. Um, and because of his painterly style and the realism and the models that he uses to, you know, inspire him, like it feel that's why it had such an impact on me, because you
yeah,
feel every little panel of it. You see the terror in Billy's eyes, you know, you feel the despair in Norman's face. And because it's so realistic, it's not cartoonish. Um, like a lot of stuff was in the 90s. It was hyper stylized to the extreme, but because you're getting these realistic looking images, it hits so much harder, especially when you consider that these are either, you know, based on real people like his father, or, you know, they're familiar aspects of the DC universe that we haven't seen in a long time. Um, you know, be it Lobo or Marvin. Was it Marvin from the Super Friends? Melvin, whoever it was. It's just you're seeing these people in a whole new light, not just because they're older, but because, you know, time has changed who they are and the world has changed who they are. And like this is a pretty standard page
uh-huh.
from like modern standpoints. So many people like Domenico, who does a lot of, he did like Batman the Night and The Flash and Spider-Man Noir. Like he'll use these like letterbox panels all the time to give it that cinematic flair. But like Ross knows when to be wide to set up the scene, and then, you know, tighten in like with the heat vision, and then go like
Yeah.
everything about this to me image wise is perfect. The only, you know, the only qualm I feel like I ever had with this book, um, and it's just a personal taste thing. Like the fan in me wanted to see more of like the Flash because of where I was at that point in time, what Wade was doing, and the fact that the Flash never says a word, and you have to wait until this came out really to get it in print, that because he has a Q&A and he definitely answers that Alan Scott is, you know, the Green Lantern and that the Flash is Wally West, but there could be elements that he and Barry and Jay formed a composite Flash, and it's made him kind of out of touch with his humanity. But you know, his daughter is um, carrying on the legacy as like Kid Flash, and it even has a genealogy, and it has this, you know, breakdown of Wally West being linked with Angela Margolin, and then they have, you know, this new Iris West, and Angela is someone that gets paid off a few years later in Wade's run, when he was co-writing it with Augustin at that point. So there's just so much in here, and I can't I can't look at this page and think like this guy doesn't know what he's doing with his layouts or that they aren't inspiring, because I mean, this is heroism mixed with dread at the same time.
Yeah.
know?
Totally. Chris, you want to comment about this or have a new conversation piece?
I mean, the photorealism is a really important part of the impact of this book.
I agree with that.
Especially, you know, in consideration of the context of the time, when Alex Ross was still a relatively new entity when it comes to this kind of storytelling. You know, it's a big part of the Marvels too, or Marvels, I should say, not the Marvels.
Oh yeah,
that's something else. But I really felt like seeing the characters realized with such fidelity and in a visual language that represents a pretty close approximation of what I see when I open my eyes. It makes it feel more. Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Glad to hear it, Brian. But it makes it feel more realistic, despite the fact that this is, you know, high fantasy to the nth degree. But the photorealism, you know, this was 1996, and the first time I read this, even though the story was more than 10 years old at this point, I was still able to understand at that time just how unique and exceptional the visual design of the story is, because, you know, at that point in time, what was the best looking superhero film that we had ever gotten by then? Hugely subjective.
I mean, I think Batman 89, obviously, in my opinion, the best looking at that point.
Batman 89. I mean, Superman, I think, does warrant consideration.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I think those two are
1990.
Hey, you know what? The first part of that movie rips. I don't care what y'all say.
But it didn't exactly have a big budget feel, right?
Yeah.
No. We had not seen prestige superhero cinema really ever by that point.
Except for 77 and is it 70s? I always forget the year. 77?
78.
78 and 89.
Yeah, but I mean, even by 1996, Superman 78, despite how well it still holds up, you know, it's an all-time favorite of mine, of course.
95.
But it still did have a bit of a dated look by 1996, you know? So a peak, and I mean, I think that movie is generally pretty timeless, except for the haircuts and the typewriters. That's about the only things that seem anachronistic.
Hey, take those typewriters out. Just put CGI in them, right? Right, ET?
Right. I still want to know why a bald guy would wear a wig that has a receding hairline, but, you know, it's just me.
You know, more realistic.
That's the 80s, man.
But all that to say that this was really a strong look at prestige superhero storytelling in a way that it had never really been fully realized before. I mean, obviously Marvels came close, and I love Kurt Busiek to death. But this story does aim a little bit higher in my estimation, you know? And
because
I feel like it ends more optimistically too.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I think the big thing my biggest criticism of Marvels is that the superheroes, you know, don't get enough light, right? It's almost like we can't have the heroes be more of a focal point, because we have to follow the which I love. Again, I love Marvels, don't get me wrong. I think it's great, but I think Kingdom Come is better because the heroes are the central part of the story, even though you have the through line of the pastor and the parallels with using both as this man of God struggling with his faith in higher power, while the higher powers are trying to figure out their whole thing. You still have the heroes as front and center, and you have action. And that's why I go back to my whole pacing thing, is that Kurt Busiek is a legend, but Mark Waid took this brilliant, to me, this is like, as a someone who wants to be a comic writer at one point and put out their own comic books, I can tell you that the pacing of this should be studied, in my opinion, because you see exactly how he's setting things up for later on, and how he uses everything to his advantage, and he does let, for all intents and purposes, Alex Ross cook. And I think that, he understood the assignment of, and he was very distinct in his plotting of what he needs to do. And I think that, again, the without the pacing, with all this, I don't know if Alex Ross's art gets it over the hump, but with that combination of the right time, right place, it just does everything. It hits everything in the right way. But again, Marvel, to your point, Chris, it just doesn't. It doesn't have the same effect, and it's because the heroes aren't. It's not just because they aren't the focal point, but they're not really showing to be doing a whole ton. And when, to me, Marvel's is the most impact when they are the focal point. I love, is it Sheldon? Is that his name? Is it Phil or something like that?
Phil
somewhere around there.
Sheldon.
Yeah, something like that. It's great to see him interact with his family and have and the whole idea. But like, when the heroes are connected with it, that's when it always hits. And to me, Mark Waid, I think maybe I'm reading too much into this. It feels like he understood what made Marvels and said, we gotta lean into that, and I know exactly what to do. And he just nailed it out of the ballpark.
Well, for me, someone who read Marvels, after this, like, to me, this page is very Marvels, like,
Yeah,
because
agreed.
everything's from from Bill's point of view, and it's a scary world because there's all these people who just run around and cause destruction and end lives, including the lives of innocents like Gwen Stacy, from his point of view, because he doesn't know the full story. But that story never, for me, it never got to the point where you admire the heroes, where you look up to the heroes. They're always something to be afraid of. And my big takeaway from that story was the Marvel universe is a scary, dangerous place to live in as an everyday person. And while we do share similarities with that, with, how wanton this next generation is with their fighting, it starts off and then it eventually ends from a place of hope and wonder and positivity and happiness. And it's just a really satisfying ending, and that I don't get when I read Marvels. Like, it doesn't stop in a place of fear to me. It's optimism of what can come next, and teaching a better way. And while
Yeah.
it is a Superman, to me, it's a Superman story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Highlighted by this final page, but that's not to say that he's the only character arc, because like you mentioned, Paul Norman has an arc. Batman has an arc. And Wonder Woman certainly has an arc. So it's really more a story about almost the Trinity, how they fall apart because of certain actions, and how Billy has an arc, as kind of truncated as it is. But I mean, they all come through the other side, and they're very different. They're the same people, but they're also different by the end of it, and they can make different choices that they wouldn't have before. And I think that's really crucial to the success of this story. Is while you saw the human side of the Marvel universe, in this you see the humanity and the heroes, and what happens if they put themselves up as gods, and how they have to remember to come back to Earth and live among society.
Well said.
Hey, thanks.
One thing I really want to get you guys in on this, because you're probably wondering, why? So Kingdom Come is an all-encompassing story, right? Like, what makes Kingdom Come a Superman story? And I think that to me, I think you made a great point here, Kavi, is that you always view this. You always viewed Superman. This is a Superman story, and I 1000% agree. And I want to get your guys taking it here in a little bit, but to me, he was all. I mean, this, and obviously, what's really interesting to me too, Javi and Chris, that this story, when it came out, Superman wasn't exactly like the Superman's Superman, right? He's always going to be one of the most popular superheroes of all time. I mean, his insignia his symbol is it's just timeless. It's going to live forever. And the thing about this at the time, the 90s, Superman wasn't exactly a hip happening dude, if you will, right? Like Batman always will be something of have an edge to him. And to me, what makes Mark Waid so special with this, and I think emphasize Superman here, is that he didn't like. I think a lot of lazy writers would be like, "We gotta focus on Batman because he's Batman, right? Like it's gotta center on him because of everything, right?" And that's not here. To me, this is all about Superman because he embodies the godlike idea, right? Like, and I love how it's obvious when he says, "Call me Cal, not Clark," right? And I love the fact that why this is a Superman story is because you see the growth of a character that lost his way, which again, the whole trope of lost his way, whatever. And he feels like he's out of place. He finds himself like, I have to become bigger than myself again. And he thinks, and I love the idea that what he always kind of, again, and this is what I want to ask you guys, and I'll throw it to you guys in here in a second. I'm sorry, along with it. Again, I told you I had a lot to say about this. The thing about what I thought fascinating about the Superman story and why I wanted it for the countdown to Superman, because I think when I think of Superman, he's always rejected the idea of a god. Like, I am not a god. I am a man. And here is the opposite. It's like he's so far gone because of like his bitterness of what life and what people have treated him as. The people he's protected, he counted himself as, they have rejected him and put this cable-like mother effer named Magog as, like their new Superman. That even, I love that he challenges Superman. He's like, I won by default, blah, 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 that whole thing. I love the fact that Superman goes, and because he's so jaded, and the whole idea of a hero, becoming like the whole Luke Skywalker from Last Jedi thing. I don't want to bring this up, but just bear with me.
Oh, it was going to come up.
Oh, sure. The reason why it works better here is because it makes a lot more sense of why Superman will reject, in my opinion, what he always was fighting against. And it was the whole godlike thing that was so easy for him to come into that he was like, no, that's not who I am. But because he was rejected by everyone that, what he represented, he felt alienated from the people that he wanted to associate himself with. So he goes off by himself, and then now takes off his name, Clark, goes back to his alien name or whatever you want to, how you want to say that. I don't mean it in disrespect by that, but and then says, oh yeah, and realizes like, we are gods. We got to put people in line because that's what we are.
He's reluctant about it though. I think that's important to bring up, that's part of his conflict with Wonder Woman is he doesn't agree with her point of view. And she's much more on the other side of things.
But the fact that he buys into it, it makes him realize he kind of comes to it, not to his senses, but he comes to the realization to himself that I am a god. I have to embrace this, but he's already leaning that way. I think that's why Wonder Woman's there. Right. So to throw it out to you guys, the reason why I think this is a Superman story is because we see, and again, to me, why I love it is the fact that we see the rejection of humanity and what makes Superman a special character and what happens when lazy writing, again, it's not like what I'm saying here. Someone lazily could be like, Superman needs to be more like this, and why that's why it doesn't work for the character, and ultimately why it works for him to be that quote unquote big blues boy scout, whatever, and embrace what makes him special is emphasized in to me the backbone of this whole story with Norm McKay, and the whole forgiveness aspect, because to me, without Superman, like you said, Javi, kind of waffling a little bit and realizing it doesn't have the same impact. Batman could never do that. Even Wonder Woman couldn't do that. But Superman can, because he can, above all else, he embraces humanity and his own humanity all the time until he didn't. And when he didn't, he became a shell of himself, as we see here, an empty god, if you will. So anyway, I'm curious where you guys kind of land on this. Chris, I'll throw it to you. I guess first, you've been a while, you haven't talked. Where, I mean, I'm assuming you agree this is a Superman story. That's what I always, what would you agree to that? And if you do or don't, why or why not?
No, I do, but I think maybe for a little bit of a different reason, just in the sense that the way that the story has been designed, it's to try and tell us about, well, what's the core essential piece of the DC universe that keeps the heroes on the side of heroics. And the first issue, one of the reasons why it's such an effective opening salvo for this series is because it shows us directly, well, if the core inciting inspiration of the entire heroic side of the DC universe is taken out of the equation or removes himself from the equation, as is the case here, everything unravels. It's not until he reinserts himself that people see him as a rallying cry to return to a purer form of heroism that gets away from the chaos that has engulfed the rest of the world. Superman is deliberately designed by the creators as a stabilizing presence that if you take him away, then there's a lot of ability for these heroes to fly off the handle and to not even care about collateral damage. I think Superman would probably say that the idea is to show them the path to a point where hopefully they don't need me. But this malignant influence of Magog's brand of heroism, Magog, or however you want to pronounce it, the malignant influence of that was so transformative and upending that it required the equal and opposite heroic force to balance the scale and to show people why it's worth taking the approach that comes with preserving life and preserving stability and preserving order. Because there's a lot of, there's a bit of an indictment on not just the metahumans that are running amok, but on the appetites of society, really, to tolerate this brand of heroism to the point where these crazy people were elevated and now everyone is just terrified all the time of what the world has become because everyone kind of allowed them to take a leading position. And, I don't think I need to spell out the relevance of a point like that, particularly in interesting times. But having that stabilizing presence that is Superman is critically important to finding a way out of the wilderness. And Mark Waid has enough personal reverence for Superman, and he has such a powerful collaborator in Ross that those feelings that he has are able to be imbued into the story so that people who might not have ever read a DC Universe story or even a Superman story are probably going to be able to understand, because of the storytelling and because of the visual language, the reverent element that this story pushes forward for Superman. Unlike, some other stories that we've read on this list in terms of trying to bring someone up to speed with Superman for the first time, I would have very few qualms about putting Kingdom Come in their hands as their first comic book. Because despite, you get what you need from the brief flashback moments and the contextual information and the exposition that's laid down over the course of the story. It's one of the things that makes it so well layered. But even without having, if you've never read a comic book in your life, if you finish Kingdom Come #1, you will know what the world has lost. You will feel what the world has lost by having these heroes step back or retreat into their own domains. And when you see Superman come back, I would be very surprised if even a cold reader didn't understand the significance of what that represents in the world that's set up here. So that's why it's a Superman story, because without him, it doesn't work.
And really quickly, Javi, before if you want to jump in or anything, I want to say that I think you nailed it here, because one thing about, we talk about Alex Ross and his storytelling, his panels layouts and everything. And I'm obviously Mark Waid has something to do with this too, but the buildup of this picture by itself, in my opinion, embodies why you're exactly right. Anyone reading will know the importance of the fact that he's holding these two new heroes like they're nothing, and he's looking down, like the whole dynamic of the page, right? Yeah, you're holding two, and one's like, a Joker, like, or three people. What am I thinking of? Two. He's holding three people here.
Two in one hand.
Yeah, two in one hand, and the other one's like giant machine gun, like they're nothing. And again, the whole reverence of like the godlike imagery, looking down on the people below him. That is beautifully done with one page. That you had the writing and the buildup of Mark Waid's, narrative, but without this picture, I don't think it has that same impact. And I think that to me is what makes this such a great story of like, a great collaboration between an artist and a writer, that they really got what they were on the same page. And the fact they were able to do that is pretty impressive, because again, like you said, I have my ranking or my ratings here. We'll do at the end here in a little bit. But I agree. Like, I think most people could sit down and read the story and never read a comic book. And I could say, yeah, I could recommend this, because, this is, you get everything you need from the story about all the characters, despite of where they're at in their life. And, and I'll be honest, as someone who, I got to talk about Batman for a second, as someone who loves Batman as much as I do, I appreciated the fact that he wasn't the focal point, right? Like, he wasn't like this, he's a main character, but he's not like, to me, he's very much a supporting character, right? He's not like a main, I would never say he's a main character. I would say he's a support, he's a big supporting character, but he's not, I don't think he's integral to like the entire plot. Like, let's say I think Wonder Woman would be more of a lead character than he would be.
I don't know if I would go that far personally, just because
I would.
In that conversation that Norman McKay has with the Spectre, when he's asking him about like what role Batman really does play in all of this, and I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's like the zenith of human fortitude and ambition versus the symbol or the dominant symbol of otherworldly power, something along those lines. Those two, there we go. Yeah. One, the zenith of fortitude and ambition, the other, the pinnacle of otherworldly power. There is a balance there that is, it crystallizes the importance of Batman's presence in the heroic posture of the DCU, because it is unlike Superman's. His influence is wide ranging, but he doesn't break, right? Like, he's the one who remains committed to his mission, but even by the end of the story, even he is smart enough to understand the necessity that Superman represents, despite his bitterness at Superman's willingness to walk away.
But I think when Spectre's talking to Norman about this, it's more broad. It's not, I don't think it's narratively for just this story. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think, and I don't think that, but I don't think it's evident, or I don't think he's as prominent as would say Superman to me is the main character.
No. Yeah, in that sense, you're right. But I do think that the story gives a lot of really important service to the
for sure, yeah,
element that Batman plays, but also what it says about Batman without necessarily including Bruce Wayne in certain scenes, I think is also important, because it's another shade on the Batman legend and how it's developed and how his relationships kind of diverge. I mean, we've read enough stories to understand how close he feels to his adoptive sons in particular, and his real son these days. But he is so dismissive of those relationships because they fall in line behind well, at least one of them falls in line behind Superman, and there is a degree of bitterness, but that's one of the things that you can't replicate not being a big comic book fan is how highly regarded Dick Grayson is in Bruce Wayne's own mind.
Yeah.
And it's hard to I think in the moment, if you're not a big comic book fan and you see what Bruce says about Dick Grayson, it's easy enough to brush aside. But if you know, there's something deeper there that I think Mark Waid is actively playing with. Personally,
I gotta check in on this here. Andreas is talking about Wade's Daredevil run. Andreas, when I come in the comic shop, you may not like this, but I'm not I think this run is extremely overrated. As someone who's read a lot of Daredevil in his day, yeah, there's parts of that I like a lot, and there's parts of that I'm like, we gotta get this over with. So,
the views and opinions of Paul Herman are not necessarily representative.
You're talking about the run that ended Brubaker's run, right? You're talking about that. How it's overrated?
No, Brubaker. No, Andy Diggle. Andy Diggle ended Brubaker's run. Diggle came first, then Wade. Because Shadowland came before, and then Wade came after that. So I
didn't hate the core Shadowland mini. I just didn't like everything around it.
I didn't like Diggle either. The Andy Diggle stuff. I thought that stuff was pretty bad, to be quite honest. I thought Brubaker's stuff was solid. I'll go on it. I'll say it right now. I think the best Daredevil ever written is by Byron Bendis. Straight up. I'll say it right now.
Except for that last arc. That was a letdown. Sorry, Brian. The Decalogue.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute since I've read it.
Best covers, worst story.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
but I may have to turn in my Comic Binge membership card if that's how this is going. Because Wade's run is awesome.
Miller is
early. Miller is really, really good, but when Miller starts retelling his stuff, that's where the cracks start to come in. In my opinion, in my taste.
Yeah. So anyway, listen. We have a fellow binger, my friend Michael, who's got engaged. He's probably never going to watch this, but Michael, congratulations. I love you and Lily. He's a big Daredevil guy. We did an episode where we talked about some of the underrated underappreciated or unknown comic books that were more to go to if you don't want to go with Miller. And I would love to talk about with Wade and stuff. I'm sure he's a huge Wade fan. I definitely am a minority. I'm not going to say that I'm like the only person, but I remember I read that as it came out, and I got lost interest really fast. I will say though, Ikari is really cool. I do like that version, but that's a different podcast. So let's wrap us up here.
Well, let me touch on that. The point about Bruce Wayne is one, 100%. Superman story to me, but like you can't just dismiss Batman as not being important to the story, given how he unites the human Justice League and then goes in league with the Mankind Liberation Front. I almost said Mutant Liberation Front. But I mean, that's a key opposition to, Superman's forces, and how Batman turns Lex's own rule book against him. At the end, it uncovers everything about Shazam and the wild card that's Billy Batson. Like, you can't have this story without Batman being the yin to Superman's yang.
Yeah, and, I'm not saying. I'm just saying he's not. To me, he's not as central to the. He's not his main character, and I really appreciate that because.
Yeah. He doesn't steal the spotlight away, but I feel he's of equal importance and has equal billing with Wonder Woman.
Yeah, I mean,
because at the end of the day, it's all about the Trinity. And granted, this is not the original publication. There's an epilogue that debuted in this book first, where we got to see a year later, and all this stuff of them having lunch at Planet Krypton, or Krypton if you're a certain actor. Like, all this came after the fact in collected editions. This was not in the original.
I remember. Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of brings everything even more into focus that while Superman takes the lead, it really is the story of how the Trinity reunites and what that future is going to be.
I just have to say also,
until Wade and Ross disagree on that future.
so which really quickly, I didn't know this. There's I'm not sure if you have the panel. You probably don't. I meant to post it. In this epilogue here, when I was reading it, at one point when Batman's ordering his food, he says, "Steak, well done." And I was like, "That's my boy. Like, that's a G right there. Hell yeah, that's what I had today. A steak, well done, baby." Batman's a G. And
every chef will tell you that is not how you make steak.
That's fair. I don't give an F. That's how I like it.
I'll give points. I wanted to include it too, but we ran out of space on the hard drive. Superman heat visioning his steak to well done is a nice touch.
I didn't know that. But what's funny also really quickly too, Chris will appreciate this. Bolger, our good friend, we are big steak people, and he always gives me a lot of crap for being a steak well done guy. And I sent that to him, and I said, always knew Batman was a G. And he said, I don't believe for a second that Batman eats a well done steak. And I'm like, well, that's your headcanon. So
I don't believe it either, to be honest.
Yeah, I just always assumed that it was because he was just trying to avoid food poisoning as much as possible, despite the minimal risk that
imagine that
less than well done steak would present. He's kind of a freak when it comes to what he puts in his body, right?
Maybe he's had so much damage, so many internal injuries throughout his career, that landed him in this exoskeleton that he has to have, his food cooked 100% all the way, or
right, like a normal person would, like people who actually want their food cooked. Imagine that.
A man of his age, I'm surprised, is still eating steak, but he's also
your physical peak, right? Or
muscular guy too. So
right. So
he needs that protein.
Yeah.
By the way, I had
that exoskeleton's still heavy.
I had a steak today, well done steak. And it was fantastic. I was like, so good. Steak rules, dude. By the way, sorry.
Before you wrap it up, can we just pay tribute?
Yeah, really quick. Yeah, go ahead.
King Marvel here. How Elvis was a big Captain Marvel fan when he was little, and it's supposed that when he went into his 70s Vegas phase, that his costumes took influence from Shazam / Captain Marvel, depending on when you grew up. And so Ross reimagined it and had the Freddie Freeman Captain Marvel character take on the moniker of King Marvel and try to take some of that iconography back. And that's why he's got the mutton chops and the sash and more of a taking care of business Captain Marvel in this. And I always thought that was really fun. And I was telling my buddy Greg too, like the extras that come with this and all the sketches, like
so good.
The characters that Ross came up with, like the guy that's a cathedral, just a literal cathedral building. Like it's so like insane and so creative, and you could spend hours just pouring through all the Easter eggs and all the annotations that are included in the collected editions. If you haven't read this story, obviously I'd recommend the Absolute. Just get it as big as you possibly can to appreciate every little detail. Rorschach is in this book. The book that the Night Owl, was it Night Owl? Yeah, wrote, Under the Hood, is sold in one of the bookstores. There's the Village People. There's so many just things in here that you're guaranteed to read something or to see something different every time.
I don't, just really quickly too, for me, I'm surprised they haven't incorporated a lot of these different versions and characters.
What are you talking about?
Well, like a lot of the like a lot of the designs for these characters.
Starman came from this. Who else, Chris?
More obscure. I'm talking about more obscure people, like Nightstar. Like, where is she in DC stuff? Like, she's a great looking character. Let's see here. What else?
Well, she is in the sequel.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about in the proper DC universe.
Red Robin. Chris, you're muted. The Red Robin design gets brought up for Tim Drake.
Sure.
You were saying, Chris?
Ibn al-Zufar. I don't know how to pronounce that.
I did the Google Translate because I always thought it was like Ibn al-Zufash, and it's close to that. Let me pull it up again.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, yeah, that's kind of like a Damien.
Oh, totally.
Dude, Cathedral rips and Manitar rips. So like, where are those guys at? Like, get those guys in the continuity. If I was writing a DC comic, I mean, what's Chung Lee doing in here?
From Street Fighter?
AKA Tokyo Rose.
Oh.
Totally Chung Lee.
Oh,
okay. Dude, Demon Damsel. I mean, come on. Where are these people in the DC comics, man? That's what I want to know.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that this is like the most
It's a future
cameos since like Crisis. You know, like there is such an like it doesn't go as far as Crisis, of course, but
right.
There's characters packed on every page. And
well, let's get these guys in here. That's what I said. So anyway,
some of these designs though have made it through in some way, shape, or fashion.
No, that I know. Yeah, that I know for sure. Red Robin alone. Yeah.
Man, Billy Batson just looks so scary in the number 3 cover.
Yeah.
You know, as
so just for me, for you guys, I know you guys love this. I'm gonna give you my ratings of
the Paul ranking here.
The Paul ratings here. You guys ready for this? Here.
Go for it.
Okay.
Y'all ready for this?
So y'all ready for this? So I'm gonna do here. I'll just do this real quick. We'll wrap it up here. I give this overall rating because this full disclosure, Kingdom Come is one of my favorite comics of all time. Like Javi, it's in the top 10, top 5 maybe. And I'm gonna give this a perfect 10.0.
Wow.
I think this is a perfect comic book.
Should.
Yeah, I think this is perfect. I think everything about this. I think everything is nailed. The pacing, the dialogue, the writing, just the amount of characters used and never feels oversaturated or overdone, overused. The themes are incredible. The parallels are incredible. The art is incredible. The coloring, just everything is cinematic. It's a perfect comic book. Like just in general. I mean, you can nitpick it, sure, but yeah, it's per 10.0. Now, as a new reader friendly rating, I will say that Chris, I do agree with you, but I'm just because I'm being ultra brutal, I'm gonna give it a 7.9.
That's
because I didn't give it an 8 because there's so many goddamn characters that someone's gonna be like, I don't understand what these characters. That's
Absolutely.
the one.
That's not a controversial rating. I think that's totally fair. But that's the thing is that in spite of that, I still think a new reader would be able to follow it very
absolutely easily. And that's why I couldn't quite go to an 8. I'm like, it's not. I couldn't just give it to almost anyone, but it's close. It's so damn close.
I think you have to consider the fact that the majority, at least half these characters in this story, were created for this story. They're the next generation heroes.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Everybody, whether you're a longtime DC reader or this is your first DC comic, you're almost on the same footing because they're new to a veteran like, myself or like Chris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as someone who read it back in the 90s, who didn't know any of these characters pretty much, you're right, Chris, it didn't matter. So even though I have experience reading comic books, it was a little daunting at first, but then after I started reading, I'm like, oh, these people don't really matter. I mean, quote unquote, don't really matter because all it matters is Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, and then Norman and the Spectre. So, yeah, it to me, it's like I said, new reader friendly. It's up there. You can pretty much give us almost to anyone, almost. But yeah, the end of it on here, it's a per 10 for me. So, so we didn't really talk about this before, but next month, Javi, we're gonna be doing Superman versus the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh,
because
long in the waiting.
Yes, long on the waiting. And then we'll be doing All Star right before the movie comes out. So those out there are wondering. Yeah, it's gonna be. Yeah, I know. We'll see. We'll talk about that. But that's kind of.
We got a lot, because then there was something else I thought of today too that I texted you guys that I think we really need to do.
We'll talk. It's gonna.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. But either way, we have.
Either way, we're not done with Superman when the movie ends either.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Not by any means. So we'll keep it going. But yeah, let's wrap it up. My friends, what do you guys want to plug? Chris, I'll let you go first. Anything?
I don't really have anything outside of what's going on the Comic Binge. Keep your eyes peeled for a date soon for our discussion on Knights Never Die, Batman number 670. The beginning of the crossover, the resurrection of Ra's al Ghul, which doesn't have an abundance of relevance to the rest of the run, but it's a Batman issue that is written by Grant Morrison. It's the first issue that features Tony Daniel as the main artist that's going to take us through the majority of the rest of the time on the main title, and really the beginning of Daniel's association with Batman that would stretch for years up and through the New 52. So it's kind of an important issue in that respect, and we'll address the resurrection of Ra's al Ghul's story as much as we can, but really we are now pretty well full steam ahead to Batman RIP. We've got a few issues before then. I mean, it's going to be like a year before we get to it probably, right? But Batman RIP is the next major stop in the run, and I'm looking forward to getting into that one with you, John.
I'm in for the ride, man. I'm enjoying this a lot, so I'm all about it. Harvester, El Corazon, go for it, my friend.
I was just hoping Chris was going to plug like Section 31, and when Strange New Worlds starts up in like a month,
July 7th, just about a week after Superman. That's good. We're going to eat good in July, that's for sure. Yeah, Discovery Debrief is going to come back for Strange New Worlds primarily. We're still figuring out how to tackle Section 31, and frankly, I'm still recovering from watching it.
I still haven't watched it, so what am I doing, Paul? I've got Spidey Dude Experience. I've got to look at the artisan edition of Ultimate Spider-Man #1 imported from Italy.
Jeez.
Because they don't have it here for us Americans, but it's a beautiful, just look at the line art from the first issue in an oversized hardcover. Up to speed with Wally West. It has been an insane week. Lots of stuff going on personally. So I did not get to talk about Absolute Flash #3 this week like I wanted to, but hopefully that'll come up soon. 007 Files. Big episode just dropped over the weekend. Myself and Bill Koenig, we got to interview Raymond Benson, who, if you're unfamiliar with his work, he is the second ongoing James Bond continuation author from like the late 90s to the early 2000s. He did 6 original Bond novels, 3 movie adaptations, and a handful of short stories. And he is back as of yesterday writing a Felix Leiter novel that takes place during Fleming's original timeline, just after Live and Let Die, when he gets eaten by a shark partially and has to get prosthesis. So they're doing something weird with it. They are releasing it a couple chapters every 2 weeks online or Kindle. And then by the end of October, they'll publish the full story as a book. So he's a fellow Texan, and I got to talk to him last week, and that was really awesome. And then Batman-on-film.com, where we're doing Batman animations. I'm writing comic reviews. I just started a series within the series. Batman Begins chapter by chapter. So we're breaking down the movie in segments and just dissecting a couple scenes at a time. So maybe some familiar faces from this show will be on it someday. That would be really dope before that gets through. So we just started it. We had a prologue, and we'll be kicking it off soon, because next month is the 20th anniversary of that movie. which makes me feel old. So yeah, and then there was one other thing. Oh, I'm popping up on Peter Vera's Italian Spider-Man Coalition, and we're talking a few episodes of the animated 90s Spider-Man series and go off on our usual spider tangents. So lots of stuff coming out, not to mention, like Chris said, Knights Never Die, which so excited to get where we're going with that, and maybe even do a couple sidetracks on that too when the time comes, given
That's
some
right.
announcements that happened this week.
Yeah. So so next month we've got at some point Knights Never Die, at some point oh god, we'll be doing Batman or Superman the Ku Klux Klan, can't say that very fast. And then we're doing Fantastic Four's JMS run. So that's gonna be a lot of fun with Curtis. And then we've got Knights Never Die, obviously, and then we're next week. I believe we're gonna be doing hopefully a Peter David episode, maybe potentially, which we'll have a lot to say about that. Obviously, the recent passing of the legend himself. So I haven't figured out exactly all the dates, but we will be figuring that out soon. But anyway, a little long here. Chris, why don't you take us out, my friend?
Read more comics.
That's right. Good night, everybody.